Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. Oh, I've forgotten what I was going to do. Yeah, and I've got no rhythm. Today I'm going to take you through recent reads. So this is mostly a roundup of April because I've been so bad at doing these. And a nice, actually, cross-section of my reading habits. I've got a couple of graphic novels. I'll do those at the beginning, get them out of the way because I know not everyone's a fan. I've got some genre stuff. I've got some plays. I've got some novels in translation and some non-fiction. And there's stuff that I've already spoken. I think I spoke about the Kate Atkinson. That's probably would have been in here. I did that in my last video. So let me tell you what I've got here. So first of all, the comic book stuff and graphic novels. This is my ongoing. One of my projects is reading Ed Brubaker's Captain America series, and this was issues 22 to 24 in that series, which was the crossover with Civil War. Kind of enjoyed that. Really enjoying that run. I'm kind of reading it out of order. I guess when eventually I collect all the different, because I buy them when I find them cheap. I'm not going out and chase them the way I would a normal series. They're harder to find secondhand, in order. So I pick them up when I find them for 2, 3, 4, 5 quid. Cover price on these things is usually 12, 15, $20. But that's that. Still good. Still enjoying the art. Still enjoying the story. I think it's one. I was never a fan of Captain America. He's a bit like Superman, right? He was just a big red, white, and blue Boy Scout. But actually, this run has been terrifically entertaining. Also, another one of my ongoing projects, and this is because I bought a whole bunch of these all in one go, and the novelty wore off after, but I've still got 2 or 3 more to go. And this is Squirrel Girl. This is volume 6. And there were 2 Squirrel Girls. I think volumes 1 and 2 cover the first series, then it relaunched with a new unbeatable Squirrel Girl. And I keep saying Squirrel Girl instead of how I would pronounce it, which is Squirrel Girl, which is how I pronounced it for all the time that I ever came across this character, until I realized that the whole thing was supposed to be rhyming. So it's Squirrel Girl, and that's, for example, it's all puns. Who runs the world? Squirrels. It's just weird, and I kind of over it. This is Ryan North is the writer on these. There's a lot of little notes at the bottom, footnotes for comic books, which is kind of distracting. They're fun. I kind of got the point. I've still got 2 or 3 more of these to go, but so I'll get through those. But it's become a little bit of a chore. And then this was a sort of purchase that I never knew I needed, but I found someone. This is when I was back before I went to London. There was somebody on Facebook Marketplace in the UK. I looked around where my mum's apartment was to see if anyone was selling stuff, and there were a couple of things that I wanted, and I threw this in. So I paid £5 or £6 for this. This is Scott McCloud's Zot, 1987 to 1991, a complete black and white collection. So Zot was a character, independent comic character created by Scott McCloud. I think the first 10 or 11 issues were in color. And this is the late 80s, when the independent comic world had its own very specific economic necessities, and then he switched to black and white, and this is considered the heyday of this comic. So what do I know about Scott McCloud? I've read 2 of his great volumes about making comics. The first one's, I think, it's called Understanding Comics, and the second one is called Making Comics. And that's how I first encountered him, as many people encountered him for the first time, writing this terrific, smart work about what comic books are and what what the makeup of the page is, and how time changes from panel to panel, what the gutter is between the panel, what visual representations are, how do we recognize dot line as a face, and those kind of representations of faces throughout history. And it's just a really smart work that made a lot of people, including me, fans of Scott McCloud. I then read, he put out a graphic novel in the last 5 years, I think, called The Sculptor, which was a big, thick graphic novel, which I picked up in hardback, and was, a tough read. So I like the non-fiction, the graphic non-fiction. I've read 2 of the 3 volumes. I never got around to the 3rd one. And I read The Sculptor. So I had an opportunity to pick this up for, I think, 6 quid. And I thought I'd go back and see what this is all about. And it's dated. It's sort of has a debt to anime, which I've never really got on with. I get some of it, the point, it changed in tone as well through the thing, because he was still developing that is what he wanted to be. Is this a superhero comic, or is this a reflection on modern malaise of Britain, not Britain, sorry, America in the late 80s, early 90s. And so there's a lot of different things going on. Zot is a character from another dimension, lives in a kind of utopian world, and he crosses over into our dimension and meets a teenage girl who's kind of fed up and miserable and bored, and school gets her down, and her parents are getting divorced, and when she travels to his world and sees how amazing and wonderful and perfect everything is, she kind of wants to leave her world behind and only live in his world. And he is this idealistic, everything works out for him and everything's great because he's a superhero thing, but only sees good in people and defeats the baddies but feels empathy for them. And when he comes to our world and sees that there is drug addiction and just general unhappiness and teenage angst and things, he doesn't really understand. So there's that kind of thing going on. It's a great big thick book and actually was a bit of a slog. Happy to have it, in my collection because I've had some good experiences with Scott McCloud, but this wasn't great. Okay, let's look at genre fiction. So detective stuff. This is the fourth, I believe, in the series, the DKA. It's called the DKA file novel. DKA is Dan Kearney Associates, which is a group of RICO men and private detectives on the West Coast. Joe Gores, I've never in all this time learned how to pronounce his name. I think it's Gores or Gores, I don't know. I picked this up secondhand. I wanted to say, yeah, weirdly. So I picked this up, and I think it's actually signed. Now I have this is the fourth in the series. I think there was a break in between, so this came a few years later, and there may be one or two more of these to go. These are all published by Mysterious Press, which was originally founded by Otto Penzler. I've actually been to his bookshop in New York, and it's fabulous. And these are just solid. This one actually more light-hearted than an earlier one, which was much more hard-boiled. But as I say, they are a sort of debt collection repo agency. So what's happened is someone has conned the banks, and this is all pre-digital era. So someone wrote checks, kept moving the money around, kept writing checks and moving the money out before the checks got cashed, and managed to get away with a whole bunch of the book is called 32 Cadillacs, a whole bunch of Cadillacs, and Dan Kearney's agency is tasked with recovering the cars before the bank takes a massive loss. And so he negotiates how much he'll get for each car returned. The bank are on his neck to try and get the cars back. The people that stole them are trying to evade recapture. And there's just story after story of his detectives pounding the streets, tracking down leads, trying to find these cars, and then escape with them before they get crap beaten out of them by the person who stole them in the first place. This was super fun, dreadfully racist. I'm not even going to touch on the ethnic group which is behind the robberies and the number of racist epithets that are used against them. But then also there is a sort of grudging respect also, but it's a respect for the sort of the integrity of the culture of thieving, which isn't great. Yeah, it's not great. I can't recommend this. It's a romp and fun, and I'm reading in context of the others and delighting in the sort of hard-boiled detective nature of it. But I really, in 2023, this kind of thing could never and should never be published. But as a historical artifact, its aim is not to foment racial hatred. That's the best thing I could say. I guess that's a low bar to set for a book, but it is what it is. I'm not buying this new. I'm buying this secondhand. And as I said, I've got a couple more in the series which I may get to. I think I'll probably do some investigation to find out if they are also as racist. But I think this was specifically in the context of this book. That's what this was doing. 32 Cadillacs by Joe Gores. I'm really sorry. Kind of fun, and I'm great. I've got all them. I've got all four of them in the in this Mysterious Press edition up there somewhere. Anyway, okay. Then something I don't do a lot of, some plays, and this is fantastic. This was the complete plays by Joe Orton, a figure who I became aware of when I was doing my A-levels in school, so my last year of high school, sort of 86, 87. Joe Orton was being talked about. I think that was around about the time of the making of the movie Prick Up Your Ears, which was a biography of Joe Orton that was written by John Lahr, who writes the introduction here. John Lahr, who is a theatre critic and all-round critic and writer, happens to be the son of Bert Lahr, who was a cowardly lion in the movie The Wizard of Oz. That's just an interesting fact about John Lahr. But he'd written, I think he'd edited the Orton Diaries, and wrote the book Prick Up Your Ears, which is made into a Stephen Frears movie with Gary Oldman as Joe Orton and Alfred Molina as his lover Kenneth Halliwell. A doomed relationship, which I won't spoil for you if you don't know anything about Joe Orton. But this is a life tragically cut short, and this is everything that he published in his lifetime, all the plays. He was a playwright. He was transgressive. He was a gay man living his best gay life in London in the 60s. So these plays are all from, say, between 64 and 69, something like that. And so when these plays appear on the stage for the first time, they're a little transgressive. There's a lot of innuendo, a lot of just all around sex. They're comedies for the most part, and including the, I think it comes to a peak at his final play, which was What the Butler Saw, which is just a transcendent farce that harks back to the great farces, also sort of Shakespearean elements with men disguised as women and women disguised as men, and just rampant sexuality. Everyone's lusting after someone else and getting caught by their spouses and indiscretions, and just fantastic. But even before that, there are a couple of great, I think his two best known and probably most revived plays before that were Entertaining Mr. Sloane and Loot, also sort of Hitchcockian elements, and so this sort of transgressive sexuality for the in the era of increased sexuality, the 60s, the permissive era. He's writing his hardest. And when we think of what we know biographically about Orton, was that he would steal books from the library and deface them, and he was actually imprisoned, tried and found guilty and imprisoned for this. But he's not. When you read the plays, this man is clearly deeply erudite, deeply interested in the mechanics of theatre and the mechanics of farce, and not just the mechanics of farce, the language used in these situations. And these were very readable. To my regret, I've never seen Orton on the stage. I've never seen any of these plays being performed. I think the one that stands up for me most is the last one, which is just a tragic commentary on a life cut short. I'd really love to see What the Butler Saw, and from someone who's not a huge fan of broad comedy, I like to laugh, and I know what I find funny, but I think there's a darkness here and a sort of a commentary about farce, which is just knowing enough that I think that would be a really entertaining, properly funny. Even on the page, it's properly funny, but seeing it performed, I think, would be a treat. So that's What the Butler Saw is that. But I guess any of them, Entertaining Sloane or Luke, would also be good. And then there's the other stuff in here is some radio plays or screenplays for things that were performed on TV, to more or less successful, but really exciting to have the complete collection here. I guess one day I should probably go and read Prick Up Your Ears, Lahr's biography. Say it was on my radar almost 40 years ago, and it's taking me this long to get around to read all the plays. Joe Orton, the complete plays. A couple of works in translation. Dogs of Summer by Andrea Abreu. I'm sorry. Translated by Julia Sanchez. I don't know. I'm sorry, everybody, for mispronouncing everyone's names. This was promoted by CJ Reeds and Jaden from, I've forgotten, Bar in the Bookcase, something like that, who got together and did a joint end of 2022, their best reads. And this was a book they each had on their list. And so I was inspired to go out and buy it. And so, it fits my sort of plans for reading relatively short novels. The whole thing is 165 pages. There's a fierce picture of the author. And again, it's a kind of transgressive look at teenage girls, sometimes I think preteen girls, and it's called The Dogs of Summer, and those long dog days of sweaty days of endless summer. That's what's going on here. And a sort of uneven relationship, similar to what we've seen, I guess, in Ferranti books, similar to what I read recently in the Book of Goose by Yun Lee. This sense of the girl that somehow has power over her peers and contemporaries because she's the one who has ideas, or let's try this, or what happens if you lick that, and the one that's in her thrall who is kind of aware of her submissiveness, but cannot break away from this charismatic leader. And in this tiny microcosm, that's what's being played out here. Two young girls living with their families, but being left their own devices for many days at a time, and what they get up to, and their burgeoning sexuality, and their trying to make sense of the world around them. And that, I kind of got it and didn't love it. I guess I might recommend it to others. I think there's value in reading works in translation, works by authors 20, 25 years younger than me, but this didn't wholly work for me in telling this story of the world outside my experience of young girls and finding their place in the world. Dr. Summer by Andrea Abra. I don't even know what the Spanish one. It's translated from the Spanish, right? Anyway, didn't love it. Sorry, CJ. Sorry, Jaden. But thanks for the recommendation, and I'm pleased I got it. Another work in translation which I bought a while back and have been sitting on my shelf. I'm doing this thing. These are all books that have been sitting on my shelf. I haven't bought anything in 2023. So this was a book that was sitting on my shelf for a couple of years that I bought. I was, perfect example of something that I was excited about when it came out, and then as I finish each book and decide what I'm going to pick up next, it just got pushed further and further down the path. So in this time of not buying anything new, I turned back to it, and this is Little Eyes by Samantha Schweblin. This was previously I read Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin, which I didn't enjoy very much at all, and now I met Samantha Schweblin. She came to the International Writers Festival in Jerusalem, and she was just a charming interview and a sort of friendly, humble, really sort of pleasure to meet her. And I went up to her and got a time where I told her how much I loved her book. Even I hadn't loved her book so much, but kind of my memory of that book now is changed by how pleasant and friendly she was, and she signed my book, and it's great. So I thought, okay, I'm going to pick up my book. Fever Dream is kind of tough to get into. The whole thing is, see if you can work it out, a fever dream. Fever Dream is not the direct translation of the original Spanish title. Again, I think so. Yes, she's from the Argentine, but I think she's in German. There's some confusion, right? I think Schweblin is a vaguely German, it looks Germanic to me, but she's from Argentina. So yes, I think she writes in Spanish. And Fever Dream is just a kind of, we're saying it's not the direct translation of the title. The direct translation of the title is something like Escape Distance, and Fever Dream is about the parental anxiety about how far your kids are you, and how that fear all the time that something's going to happen to them, and compelling and fascinating from that side. So maybe my sense of the book would have been different if they'd given it the right title. I think Fever Dream's a terrible title, but I struggle with it. Anyway, along comes Little Eyes, which is a kind of speculative work. It's not. It's literary fiction, but it's about sort of a kind of what do you call them? Not Tamagotchis. What was the Furbies? You remember, like a Furby, where you could train it to do certain things and it would talk back to you. And so there's little creatures, the furry creatures that look to you in big eyes. So this is about creatures, and they're called Kentuckies. I'm not sure how we pronounce it. It's like Kentuki is the name of the creature. They come in all different forms. There's a dragon and a penguin and a panda, and you can buy one of these things on one side, or you can buy a license to control one of these things on the other side, and you can't choose which you want. So when you buy one, you plug it in the first time, and it connects over Wi-Fi to somebody on the other world who's bought a license something, and they suddenly can see through the eyes of this creature, who cannot communicate in any way. It can move around, has wheels, it can chirp a little bit and purr, but beyond that, there's no communication between the person on the other side of the world looking out of the eyes of this creature and the person being viewed by this creature. And it talks the whole nature of privacy, of who we are, private and public, and it is really quite good. There are a lot of vignettes, so we get a lot of different stories. There's one that shows up in one part of the world, or one that shows up in another part of the world. Then the person watching from one part of the world who is seeing a part of the world they've never experienced before, seeing snow for the first time because they're in Antigua, and a little boy who all he wants to do is escape. He's like, because the Kentucky that he's seeing through is trapped in a shop window and never allowed out, and how the determination to communicate, the sense of loneliness. There's a lot going on here. Really entertaining. I guess in some ways in conversation with things like Clara and the Sun and McEwen's Machines Like Me, but those are all about artificial intelligence, and this is about the individual loneliness and the way we might choose to be a voyeur in someone else's life, or choose to be viewed and watched, and how that affects us. I thought this was quite effective. Enjoyed this much more than Fever Dream, and would definitely recommend it because it's got that sort of speculative, that world that isn't quite here yet, but feels very familiar. And when it looks at this thing, but there are chapters from the point of view of someone looking out. There are chapters from the point of view of someone who has one of these things following them around. And then there are other stories. It looks at it from all different angles in what's essentially a slight novel. I imagine it was 200 and something pages, 240 pages, so classic novel length, but gets a lot done, covers a lot of ground in really interesting ways. That is Little Eyes by Samantha Schweblin, and that's recommended. And then the last thing, I've talked a lot. The last one I'm going to talk about, because I've read this, and my wife also read this. This is a work of non-fiction called Strangers to Ourselves by Rachel Aviv, which was on the New York Times Notable Books of 2022. So that's why I picked this up. I picked this, I bought this in Foyles in London on Boxing Day at the half-price sale. So this was new in England, £18.99, and I got it for half that. And it's the review the review of the review in the New York Times had intrigued me enough to check this out. Rachel Aviv is a staff writer at the New Yorker, as is Patrick Radden Keefe, who we've read in Say Nothing, and then the one about the Empire of Pain. And so I guess she's, if not a contemporary of his, at least a colleague of his. And I kind of like the idea what's it called? Leif Batterman, so this is on the cover, saying a paradigm-shifting exploration of the relationship between diagnosis and identity. On the back, we've got Patrick Radden Keefe. There, that's why I brought him up. So he's blubbed her. Leslie Jameson, who I don't know, and Kathy Park Hong, whose name is familiar to me, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you what she's written or who that is. So another example of one of these non-fiction books that kind of was missold to me. So I thought this was going to be like a sort of Oliver Sacks set of case studies about different people and their sense of self, and some modern look at different kinds of anxiety and challenges that people face in the 21st century. Actually, there's a lot of Rachel Aviv in this book, which is, I remember back when I studied journalism, the first thing that we were taught was there's no I in journalism. You don't write about yourself. You don't insert yourself in the story. Actually, a lot of this is about Ms. Aviv, but I think there's enough interesting things going on in her life, and she does. There's 3 or 4 other main characters. I think how many? There's 1, 2, 3. So there's 4 chapters not about her, but her story interweaves between these. And to start off, I'll start with the opening of this. She talks about being 6 years old, and I guess she's now in her 40s, so younger than me. But at 6 years old, she was admitted to hospital with the youngest ever case at the time of anorexia. And she talks about anorexia being a reading disorder. And she explains that, which was a phrase I hadn't heard, because it's something that young people read about and learn from other people's experience and learn how to be anorexic. And so she's on this ward with 13, 14-year-olds who are being treated and suffering for this horrible illness, but she is unable to read at this point. This is a 6-year-old, and the doctors have no idea. And to some degree, she talks about how she got over this, and that was what she did that summer. And later on, she went back to school and she started eating again, and that didn't linger. And the whole thing clearly related to the breakup of her parents' marriage and what was going on in her life. And she's kind of, done enough therapy to understand what was happening, but she was lucky enough to escape before the behavior became learned, because she was surrounded by other, perhaps more hardcore, not a clinical phrase, anorexics, but she managed to escape that and get away. Later on, she revisits and tries to find out what happened to the other people she was in hospital with. That time she remembers them, and she remembers how fabulous and stoic and clear-sighted they were about their illness and their determination. Sometimes determination to get better, but other times determination to stay the course and refuse to eat. So that's the opening chapter, and then we go on and we talk about other people and different types of illness that they've suffered and how they were treated and how that was reflected, and medication, did it work, should have been prescribed, and there are no easy answers here. So it's not a book about saying, and this is what you do, and this is how you get over this, and this is the resolution. Actually, there's a lot of presentation of realities and the way families respond, the way mental illness can affect families. And there are instances, one story about a woman who clearly poverty and discrimination has generational discrimination has impacted her relationship to treatment and medicine and her illness. And there's another instance of someone who seems to have all the privilege, all the financial support, and everything that would help enable her to avoid the depression and the constant round of treatment and adjusting the medication to serve, as resistance builds up. We see, even in these handful of examples, we see a spectrum of responses, and then we come in the last chapter, we revisit, as I say, some of those people that Aviv was met the first time she was hospitalized. No easy answers, not quite the book I thought it was going to be, but very readable and well written, even if it was a bit me. Okay, I think she's got an interesting enough story that's okay. So it's more memoir, I guess, than non-fiction case studies about other people. It's in that crossover between those. I read this, my wife read it and really enjoyed That's Strange to Ourselves by Rachel Aviv, and that's it. And right now I'm reading another one of my ongoing projects, Ed McBain. This is a bind up of 3 of his novels, 40, 41 and 42 in the series. So I had this on my shelf for a while. I bought this instead of I've been buying them individually. I've got 39 other standalones, not standalones, they're all part of the 87th precinct, but standalone in terms of individual books. And I found this cheaper to buy all 3 together than buy them 3 separately. But then it's that thing, I don't really want to tackle all 3. And in this period of not buying new books, I've now read 2 of them. I'm just started the 3rd one. I'll get through that and then read something else. And that is a lot of talking about books in the month of April. Hope you're well. Good night. God bless. Bye.